If you just let it go like that, it'll be fine, right?
You can say that because you haven't been affected by it. I can't handle talking to her over the phone, such things all the time. If you leave her alone, she'll keep talking endlessly. Even though my mother-in-law doesn't bully me, she's a very troublesome person. My parents-in-law live together in their own house, while my husband and I, my brother-in-law and his wife, and my sister-in-law, each live separately. If we travel by car, each residence is within a 1-hour distance, so we can visit back and forth. That's why we always go to my parents-in-law's house during the Bon Festival and New Year, and there is at least minimal interaction between siblings. The three of us, myself, my sister-in-law's wife, and my sister-in-law, have almost no age difference, so we managed to get along well. But maybe my mother-in-law feels lonely, since all the children have left the parents' house, so she calls me, my brother-in-law's wife, and my sister-in-law, almost every day. The topics of our conversations varied. All of them were nothing important. The household appliances in the parents-in-law's house. Are something wrong? Some part of her body, like her throat, waist, shoulder, knee, etc., is hurting. A stray cat entered the yard and made a mess, or she keeps changing the subject and talks for at least 30 minutes. My mother-in-law is a housewife, and she seems bored, so I guess that time isn't a big deal for her, but the three of us, myself, my brother-in-law's wife, and my sister-in-law, all work full-time as permanent employees. We don't have much time to keep her company all the time. If my mother-in-law, who has never worked or had experience in society, can't understand that women's work is hard, then we have no choice but to directly teach her that women's work is not just a side job. We firmly insisted, wrapping our words in euphemism, telling her to stop calling us during work because it's annoying. However, my mother-in-law is not understandable, saying,
I'm not spending hours on the phone, so just let it slide.
And then she keeps calling. My sister-in-law asked my father-in-law,
Dad, both I and my sisters-in-law are working, and it's bothering us when we get called during the day, with no reason. We've tried telling her, but she doesn't listen. Can you ask her to stop?
But my father-in-law, who is known for his helpless attitude, replied,
No, even if I say something, it's the same. She must just feel lonely. She's not talking for hours, so why don't you give her your time?
He tried to convey to us that his values is almost same with my mother-in-law's. Even his own daughter's words have no effect. It seems unlikely that anything I or my sister-in-law's sister-in-law say will make a difference. I thought my father-in-law was helpless, but if he avoids getting involved, even in his own wife's issues, he's way more worse, floating around, causing us distress. Since we can't rely on my father-in-law, who is close by, and even my sister-in-law, who is his own daughter, can't make her listen, the only option left is to ask my husband and brother-in-law to do something about it. You can see a tendency where my mother-in-law is weaker towards my husband, who are her sons and brother-in-law, rather than my sister-in-law, who is her daughter. If the two of them make a move, maybe something can be done. But they are ultimately the sons of my father-in-law, who is helpless. Whether we push or pull, there's no response. Even if my sister-in-law and I ask,
We want you to tell our mother to stop calling during work, because it's annoying,
they both give us a cold response, saying,
If you just let it go like that, it'll be fine.
It's not fine, that's why we're asking. Even if we tell her that we're busy and to talk later, she's someone who completely ignores it. Ignoring her doesn't work, because she'll keep talking until we respond, and it never ends. After all, she's calling because she wants attention, and it won't stop until she's satisfied. My husband and brother-in-law don't understand that at all. In the first place, my mother-in-law wants attention from my husband and brother-in-law rather than us, so she should call them directly instead of us. My mother-in-law seems to think that she shouldn't disturb the men while they're working, so if there's no urgent matter, she won't call them. It doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, right? No matter who they are, you should not disturb them while they're working. Anyway, it's clear that The men in this household are useless in solving the problem. If that's the case, we have no choice but to solve it ourselves. However, we have already confirmed that direct communication with my mother-in-law doesn't work. So, I think, we need to make her experience something that makes her want to stop making phone calls. It would be even better if we can also teach those men who showed no intention of solving this matter, claiming that it's not their concern. The three of us will put our heads together and discuss. When three people come together, they bring different perspectives. While exchanging ideas, we finally came up with a strategy. It's not something complicated. Just changing settings of my mother-in-law's cell phone a little. We will change some of the phone numbers in my mother-in-law's phone book to different numbers, while keeping the registered names the same. My mother-in-law is not good with technology. Even registering phone numbers is done by my sister-in-law. Once they are registered, it's just a matter of selecting the names. If my mother-in-law is itching to talk, she probably won't bother checking the phone numbers. She will surely call the changed numbers without realizing it. In fact, my sister-in-law was the one who changed the phone numbers. She can get close to my mother-in-law's phone without arousing any suspicion. The changes are as follows: changed my number to my husband's. Changed my brother-in-law's wife's number to my brother-in-law's. And changed my sister-in-law's number to my father-in-law's sister, my aunt-in-law. The reason we didn't change my sister-in-law's number to my father-in-law's is that, if it's connected to him, it would be easily discovered at home, and there's a risk of the plan being exposed. Besides, our main target is not the men, but my mother-in-law. Although my sister-in-law and I have only met a few times, we don't know much about each other. However, according to my sister-in-law, she is the strongest person among our relatives, and even my mother-in-law, who doesn't listen to anyone, can't ignore her, and the toxic men cannot ignore her opinion either. I feel sorry for involving our aunt-in-law, who is unrelated to this matter, but if involving her ensures a definite solution, then it's the right choice. This is my sister-in-law's assertion. My sister-in-law will execute the plan, and even though she's the youngest, she can be considered our leader. We trust what she says. It's worthy of our full trust. My sister-in-law and I nodded silently, agreeing with her opinion. My sister-in-law successfully changed the phone numbers without any issues. Of course, my mother-in-law didn't notice the change, and continued making calls as usual. The ratio of calls from my mother-in-law was 4 to me, 4 to my sister-in-law, and 2 to another sister-in-law. Now, it will be evenly distributed among my husband, brother-in-law, and aunt-in-law. When my mother-in-law intended to call us, she ended up connecting with the men, and initially, it seems she was quite confused. Well, it's understandable, since she thought she was calling us as usual. However, she didn't have any bad intentions when making the calls in the first place, so she quickly regained her composure. In fact, she seemed delighted to unexpectedly connect with her beloved sons, and continued talking happily. When she accidentally connected with my aunt-in-law, she immediately hung up and said, "Sorry, wrong number." While my mother-in-law had been considerate in the past, to avoid bothering the men, now that her calls reached them instead of us, it seems she put aside her previous considerations and happily said,
"Well, it can't be helped. I meant to call my daughters-in-law, but I end up talking to you,"
as my husband later mentioned with a tired expression. She only called my aunt-in-law once, and never again, so the ratio of calls has settled into a 1-to-1 ratio between my husband and brother-in-law. While my mother-in-law is overjoyed, my husband and brother-in-law are screaming in frustration. No matter how many times they tell her they are busy, she keeps talking non-stop. Even if we forcefully end the conversation and hang up, she calls back after a while, causing them a great deal of trouble. What's worse is that now, due to our strategy, my mother-in-law is in a very good mood. She calls us thinking she's talking to us, but it ends up connecting to my husband and brother-in-law. She seems to accepted that it can't be helped. She completely forgets about calling my sister-in-law and connecting with my aunt-in-law. Our main goal is to make my mother-in-law stop calling us, so if my husband and brother-in-law check her mobile phone, the problem would be resolved. However, in the current situation, we can't say we have achieved our goal. Since my mother-in-law is not comfortable with my aunt-in-law, I don't think she will willingly create an environment where my aunt-in-law scolds her by attempting to call my sister-in-law again. In a last-ditch effort, my mother-in-law apparently consulted my father-in-law about calling my sister-in-law's number and connecting with my aunt-in-law. But father-in-law, who has low self-esteem, dismissed it with a simple, "I don't know." He truly lives up to being called the invisible toxic heir by me. From our perspective, just by making my aunt-in-law receive a call from my mother-in-law once, we can consider it a success in involving my aunt-in-law. Now, all we need to do is take action ourselves. So, we decided to prioritize punishing my husband and brother-in-law. My husband, fed up with my mother-in-law's calls, complained to me,
"What's going on? Mom insists that she called you. Even though I told her I was busy, she didn't hang up at all. It was really tough."
But I smirked and replied,
"I don't know, who my mother-in-law is calling. Besides, didn't you say it yourself? Ignoring her calls would solve the problem, right? If you really think so, why don't you do it yourself? I hope you're not asking me to do something that you can't even do yourself, right?"
I threw his own words back at him. He just stammered,
"No, well,"
and couldn't find any more words. The same conversation apparently happened between my brother-in-law and his wife. They didn't expect the words they casually said, as if it were someone else's problem, to come back to haunt them. Unable to find words to retort, I felt a sense of satisfaction as I looked at my husband's frustrated face. Now, all that's left is to teach my mother-in-law a lesson and prevent her from making useless calls to us. The three of us headed to my aunt-in-law's house together. My sister-in-law, with a suspicious expression, said to my aunt-in-law,
"Sorry, Auntie. Do you remember that strange call we received from my mother? Well, there's a reason behind it."
With tears in her eyes, she explained the situation that led us to switch our contact number in my mother-in-law's phone book. Both my sister-in-law and I were left speechless by her bold performance. Perhaps because my aunt-in-law could only give birth to boys, she doted on my sister-in-law like a kitten, listening intently to her story. After listening to the whole story, my aunt-in-law confidently takes on the task, saying,
"That spineless man with a pickling bed. Can't he even confront his wife properly, let alone himself? Pathetic. And to make matters worse, his sons are just like him unnecessarily, taking after their parents. They should drink the bathwater of their younger sister's achievements. All right, I'll take care of the rest. I'll squeeze the life out of both of them."
She agrees to help us with a strong determination. Truly reliable. Before reprimanding her mother-in-law, my aunt-in-law calls her husband, father-in-law, and brother-in-law to the house. She unleashes her wrath upon them for not lending a hand when we were in trouble.
"What's the meaning of three men standing together and not offering any help? Don't you care about your daughters, your sisters, and your wives? You flimsy curtains. If you're pushed by a mere breeze, you'll flip over, you idiots."
Her way of scolding is unique, but the three of them are unable to retort in the face of her furious anger. They all kneel in front of my aunt-in-law, their heads hung low in defeat. Especially my husband and brother-in-law, who have already been cornered by us. Show an extreme level of disappointment. Maybe we could have been a bit gentler with them, haha. Having successfully cornered the men in front of us, my aunt-in-law leads all of us to the in-laws' house. Interestingly, as soon as my aunt-in-law's mother-in-law saw her, she seemed to sense something and tried to escape even though there was nowhere to run. Following my aunt-in-law's instructions, My husband and brother-in-law captured the mother-in-law and made her kneel in front of my aunt-in-law. The mother-in-law's forehead was dripping with sweat. It seems she has a foreboding feeling. My aunt-in-law looked down at her and scolded.
You, thinking that just because you're frolicking around like a carefree dragonfly, you think other women are the same? All three of us are working hard. They don't have to accompany you in wasting your time.
She scolded her and brought her face closer. The mother-in-law, who had turned pale, heard my aunt-in-law say,
Fine. If you have so much free time, I'll accompany you in killing time. Starting tomorrow, come to my house every day. I'll make sure you never feel bored again.
The mother-in-law desperately pleaded.
I'm sorry. I won't call anymore, so please forgive me.
But my aunt-in-law never take her words back. The mother-in-law began to cry miserably, but in the end, no one comforted her. From the next day onwards, she would receive one-on-one sessions with my aunt-in-law, thoroughly learning about the history of the husband's family and receiving re-education in household chores. Thanks to that, the mother-in-law no longer called us during our work. My aunt-in-law's adorable niece expressed gratitude and started visiting our house even more than before, making my aunt-in-law very happy. The men also returned to their peaceful everyday lives, so they have no complaints. As for the mother-in-law, who was previously bored and lonely, now that my aunt-in-law pays attention to her every day, her days have become fulfilling. Yeah. Everyone is happy now, haha. Thank you for watching until the end.